first off, Velvet Kiss. I was curious as you prepped this album for its re-release and delved back into all this material. Did it stir up any thoughts, emotions, or memories that hadn't been in your mind for a while?
A fair question. I think the whole experience of reconnecting with the singer Rick Parker, that was so unexpected. That just created this whole sort of therapy session that has lasted a few years now, really. Because I had reconnected with him right before we had the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
And so the way that happened was that I was asked to do a session here in town, and somebody ended up booking it at Rick's studio. So I really hadn't had more than a hello or a goodbye in 25 years. So we ended up chatting all night, and eventually we got around to working, and it was really enjoyable. And then when we parted,
the garbage truck. Hey, life happens.
Oh my gosh, of course it happens right now. Let's come down the street too. Okay. Yeah, Rick and I exchanged information, and at some point we were like, hey, what are you working on? What are you working on? And we created a Dropbox folder and shared some music with each other. And we started talking about maybe doing something, and it was just taking forever to really happen. So we got together at the studio, sat down in front of each other with 2 acoustic guitars, and wrote this new single, Gurl I Love You, that comes out in a week. So that sort of opened the book and the journey, because there was a lot of, are you a musician?
Only if you use like air quotes or really extend the term. I'm an awful I'm an awful drummer. But my argument is, though, learning how to play the drums made me a better listener. So like I recommend that to anyone to try and learn how to play a musical instrument, because you hear things differently once you learn how to try and create those sounds yourself. So
right. Yeah, the reason I also asked you is that when you're in a band, it's like having 3 wives or 4 wives, depending on how big the band is. Yes. And so there's a lot of dynamics, and there's a lot of good times and bad times with that. So, I had never really addressed how I felt, because there was a lot of great times, but there was a lot of difficult times in a band, and traveling and spending a lot of close quality time together. So this journey for me has been sort of like unraveling that and learning how I got to where I'm at now through that. Mm-hmm. It's been a really great experience. And as I started thinking about being able to re-release Velvet Kiss Liquid the Lime, it's great to go through all the demos. It's great to go through all the things that we put together, because it was kind of a handmade band. We made our shirts, we made programs, we made flyers, we made posters, we did all that. So going back through all of that, reconnecting with the A&R guy at EMI, talking to him, and he remembers infinitely more than I remember going through that process. So it was really cathartic, and it really left me with mostly just great memories. And it's really nice that I've reconnected with some old friends and reconnected with band members, and it's been a fun experience.
Yeah, no, that's like a wonderful, comes full circle, happy ending aspect to all this that I didn't even know was fully part of the story. So yeah, no, that's, even if you didn't put out the album, it sounds like the cathartic breakthroughs you guys had, were worth it alone.
I think so. It certainly was for Rick and I, because we spent a bunch of time together now writing and recording and mixing this song. So it was, for me, a great way to, look at this guy that I worked with when we were both really young and say to him, I was able to acknowledge to him what he brought. And I wasn't able to do that when I was 24 years old, because at 24, you're trying to figure out who the hell you are.
Yeah.
Emotionally, then there's musically, and everybody's trying to claim their little piece of the pie. And now it's like, dude, you can have my pie. It's
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
I don't care now. So yeah, it was really cathartic.
And then, since you brought it up, listening to the new song "Girl I Love You," what's amazing is, when you play it in conjunction with Velvet Kiss, is how seamlessly that song fits in with the rotation of the original songs. How much of that was, all right, we want to do something on purpose that sounds like our original stuff, and how much of it is just, if you get these players together, it's a DNA thing. It's always going to sound this way.
It's scary that we didn't try to do that on purpose, that it was all organic. The song certainly morphed as we wrote and recorded it. And because of the pandemic, there was lots of starts and stops. It was a song that shouldn't have happened in the first place, because we shouldn't have gotten together and shouldn't have written it, because it wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that started the process. And then, as we recorded it, I didn't really even think, the way I work, I usually listen to something and I sort of have a soundscape in my mind, and I'm like, okay, it's missing information over here, it needs color here. I sort of paint the whole thing out in my head, and then I attack it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the same thing with this, but after I finished guitars, and Rick actually played bass on it, after we finished doing that, and at the very last minute, I had my friend Patrick Warren come in and do string arrangement for it. Then it really took on the extra flavor of what that First Lines and Ghosts record was. And after we finished working on it and Rick mixed it, we were at the studio and we're listening back to it, and he goes, well, what do you think? And I'm like, it's really organic. It really sounds. And I just sort of stopped with the dot. And he looks and he goes, it's really weird. It kind of sounds like Lions and Ghosts. And I just started laughing when he said that. I was like, really? And then he started asking me, he goes, did you purposely do the guitars like this? Because I did them at my home studio. And I said, no. He goes, so just because of my voice or what? And I said, yeah, I think it's just that you fall into that pattern because you work together. We had probably almost a 10-year run together, maybe 7 years or something. And it works in that thing. And that you're right, the song, the mastering, I did try to master it in a way that they could sort of flow together because they were coming out near each other.
Yeah. Well, that does bring up another thing I was wondering about. When you're re-releasing something, or at least having the chance to put something out there that you haven't touched in a long time, it would seem to me that there is an urge to tinker with things, especially because, well, A, musicians tend to do that, and B, you've changed as players, as people over time, and maybe have different ideas about how things should go. And I'm just curious, besides setting this up so that it is available for streaming and all that kind of stuff, what other tweaks did you do?
Well, at first I went back and I have the vinyl of the record, so I listened to the vinyl. I have a great stereo system. I'm really fortunate. I sort of listened to it, and then I listened to some stuff from the same time period, and I thought, boy, we're really fortunate because our record holds up pretty well sonically. Peter Walsh, the guy that had produced and mixed it, worked with Peter Gabriel. He worked with Simple Minds. He made great sounding records, and clearly they're made in the 80s and they contain elements that 80s records have, right? We were also really fortunate to have Bernie Grunman, who's like a world-class mastering guy, master our record. So we started out on a really good note. And as I went through tapes and everything, I think the only thing I wanted to bring to it is knowing that we live in a world of streaming. Everybody listens on their phone. I had to put that in my mind. And so the only real tinkering that got done was there was a bit of a volume boost because there just needs to be these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And no great mastering guy really wants to do that because it does affect the dynamics of a recording. So there was discussions of that. We did a bit of that. And then there was an ever so slight opening up and a little more air on the top just to get things to ring true. I think we went through 3 rounds of mastering. And then we had to do a bit more for the single, because then once we were there, we had to get the other one a little closer to that.
Yeah. Okay.
So not a lot.
Yeah. And then will this also be re-released as an actual disc too, and or vinyl?
Well, we talked about that in the beginning. I think right now when I say we, my manager and I have a record label called Sparkle Plenty. And at the same time, we're releasing a new artist, John Brodeur from the East Coast. He has a band called Byrds. His record is coming out. We have a single coming out in a couple weeks. And then his record comes out in November. The vinyl comes out in January. And we have a bunch of stuff happening. So I think the Lines and Ghosts thing was the labor of love. And I personally knew a bunch of people that were hoping that someday it would be, available for streaming or download. So that was sort of the first chunk. We're talking about doing the second record. I have an endless supply of demos for any Crazy Lines and Ghosts fan, which I'm sure there's 3, would want to hear. So I think right now we're going to stick with digital. And then we'll see. I've had a lot of people ask me for vinyl. I personally like to go down that lane,
Yeah.
Let me turn off the alerts. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. I need to focus, so that's why I'll push that button. There we go. Yeah, I think at the moment we're just going to stay with digital for that. And then maybe we'll start having discussions about vinyl. And then I know some people, they're still kind of hanging on to the CDs too,
I still love them. Yeah. Although, I'm of that, your generation, I grew up with, you got the album and you would, sit there and look at the cover art while you listen to the entire album, be it vinyl, be it CD and such like that. And that's been my own thing, is when COVID shut everything down and suddenly I didn't have access to concerts and I got really tired of streaming and the lack of sound quality, and I started rebuilding my stereo system, and suddenly it's like I could hear all these great elements that were not in the stream.
That's I'm so with you. I mean, I love music so much, and I spend all of my time either making it, listening to it. How do I have an environment where it sounds, it's perfectly set up? I have a great, like I said, great stereo system, and I'm constantly going down that rabbit hole. And I recently sort of rediscovered CD, and I'm like, I used to complain about CDs, and I'm not going to complain about them anymore after listening to all this, I listen to high-res streaming, but a lot of times I listen to the radio streaming too, and the quality's so bad.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Right. Especially when it comes to things like bass and things of that nature,
and there's nothing left up on the high end either. There's,
no, everything is smushed. Yeah, right. Exactly. And then, talking about, having an ear for, the dynamic aspects in all of these songs, as I was going through this, I would classify your playing on most of these songs as it's almost like your guitar work is kind of like another backing vocal, there's like a harmony to it, a lyrical essence to it. It's not just like a show off shred kind of thing, but
there's
more
no shredding, no.
but more just like layers of, again, it's like a harmony. I'm curious, how did you develop that style? Where did that come from with you?
That's a great question, and I have obviously have a lot of guitar player friends, and we always sort of talk about guitar players and what we like about them, and who influenced us. And I've always been if the guy that says, "Listen, there's no vocals happening. There has to be an event." But I don't
Mhm.
think it needs to be a shredded event. I want it to be lyrical and melodic. I want it to be something that sets up something that's about to happen, or an answer to something that just went by. And it's the way that I think if I'm playing bass or if I'm playing keyboards or anything, that's my first thought is like, what serves the song? What
Mhm.
serves the singer? Okay, do I mimic the melody of the chorus on my solo, or it's that. I don't know where I got that from. A lot of the music I listen, I grew up listening to the Beatles, and that was sort of my first big musical influence. Clearly those guys are great crafters of arrangement and ideas and little things that orchestrate their music. So probably some of it's that, and a lot of the guitar players I listened to and grew up listening to, like James Honeyman Scott from the Pretenders, and they're like, even Jimmy Page is a parts player. I know that he's a shredder too, but he's really an orchestrator of parts, and I really enjoy that when I'm working on music.
Hmm. And then, you mentioned about it's you try and back the singer, you try and create a guitar part that fits the vocals. You've worked with a number of really impressive women in the world of rock, Aimee Mann and Susanna Hoffs and Fiona Apple, and something I've never really asked anyone before, but I was just curious, if you're creating a guitar part for a female voice, do you choose uh I don't know, maybe different tones or make different choices than you would if it was a male voice?
I never thought about that, but I do think that I'm always trying to sculpt whatever sound I feel is needed in it. It gets sculpted around the vocal. So, you work with three different guys, you're going to probably sculpt and record stuff that suits their voice. Uh,
Hmm.
and the difference between working with maybe Aimee or Fiona or Susanna is they all have really different voices, and there's things that work. Aimee's voice was interesting because a lot of times when we recorded, everything around her was very dry. So I tended to make everything very atmospheric around her so that there was some sort of yin and yang in that. So I think it's not female versus male more than it's just every voice is different and would call for some sort of thoughtful process about what to put next to that voice.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. And then you've also created a lot of music for movies, for television, for even Apple iMovie, and
Right.
for use with that. Is that, do you need to be in a different mindset to create that kind of music? Is it a kind of a, do you look at it, like, okay, I'm kind of shifting my perspective to create this type of music?
Um, no, I think I'm always coming from the same place. The things that I did for Apple, they're just sort of mini versions of songs.
Hmm.
So, and it's funny when you work for a company like Apple, you don't get a lot. I didn't get a lot of information because I don't think they're able to give you information. You can't really know exactly what this is for. I think
Uh,
you get this general idea of what you're going to be doing. When I created the songs from memories that is part of the photo app, when you create a memory, there's soundtracks, and I have some of those. All those were to me were little tiny songs.
hmm.
So with that, there was no vocal. Well, there was some background vocal stuff that I sang, but I always tried to find something to be the singer, whether it was a Casio keyboard whistling a melody or something. So that's really fun. I really enjoyed doing that process because I actually got to make a ton of them,
Mm.
and then I got to ship them off to them, and they decided which ones they used, and it was fun, easy process because it was just me alone in the studio going nuts.
Yeah. And what is your songwriting process when you're given a complete blank slate? Do you start with like some sort of like drum track or something like that and build off of that, or?
Drums come early on for me for sure. I usually, it's either I jump on a keyboard or an acoustic guitar and I sketch out. Let's say I have all the melodies or a good portion of the melodies in my head. So I find a basic sort of outline of the chords and I usually lay that down. And the second thing I usually do then is create drums and then start working from that. I sort of jump all over the place. Sometimes I'll spend half a day just writing and working on the chorus and nothing else. Because these days, we can do whatever we want recording wise, right? It's just, I'll scoot that there, I want an intro. So I go back and work. And usually I'm coming from some spot like the Apple stuff. Sometimes I would get an email with like 4 words. Think porch.
Okay.
So what do you do with think porch, right?
Right.
So, I'm like, okay. So I created things that were like some people sitting on a porch playing guitar together, and then no more campfire. Those are the bunch of things that I get. So those things I had some sort of idea. When I'm writing, it's usually because I'm inspired by something I just heard, or if I'm working with somebody and say it's a younger artist and they're not sort of clued into their direction yet, then we might talk about where they want to go. And sometimes I'll create something in that direction. I'm a big lover of new pop music. And so I love it. I love everything. I love classical music, country music, jazz, new music, old music. And I have 2 teenage daughters. So listen to a lot of pop music. And thank God I love it. Otherwise, I would have been my dad going, "What the hell is this kind of music?" Luckily, I'm not that guy.
Right. Well, then I got to ask: is it reciprocal? Do they appreciate what you create?
I hope so. It's so hard. My daughters are 14, or they're about to be 14, and we can sit there and talk about music all day long. Oh, this song by Halsey, why do you like that? And they're really great at sort of picking apart stuff, which makes me really happy. But when I play them things, and sometimes I have them help me with percussion and do stuff on the songs. And in fact, they did a bunch of stuff on the Apple songs. So, the only time I get reaction is when they open their phone and they're like, "Look, it's you." And I said, "No, it's you. You're on that." That I do. But when I play them new stuff that I'm working on, I don't get a whole lot of feedback. It's like, "Oh, come on, you guys are killing me. It's crickets. You got to tell me." Right? Oh, God.
Yeah. No, I'm right. That's it. You don't hear it that much. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that reminds me. I saw an interview with Jerry Seinfeld, and he talked about with his kids, he has to like tell them, "All right, I'm going to try a joke out on you," because he says if I just throw out something, they'll just look at me and be like, "You feel funny now? Yeah, you think you're funny?" It's like, oh,
I know, kids are killer.
yeah.
Oh boy.
You also you mentioned a little bit ago your new record label, Sparkle Plenty.
Yeah.
Now, an interesting time to start a label, for
He
one
says with
thing.
eyebrows raised.
Well, first off, I mean, from your perspective, coming at it from an artist's perspective, how is this going to be a different label than what's out there right now?
Well, first and foremost, nobody tells me no, and that could be good and could be bad. I, there was a few reasons for doing it, and we also did it during the pandemic. Such a weird time for all of us, and that's when I met my manager during the pandemic, And the only time we've ever met in person was when I was about 25 years old and he came to a Lions and Ghosts show.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, we just do what you and I are doing now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's up on the outskirts of Sacramento, and we do Zoom meetings and we do all this. And when I started talking to him about doing this, he's kind of like, I've got you your own deal, you know, which direction do you want to go in this? And we talked about a bunch of different things. And I was producing some songs for Bird Streets at the time. And I thought, John is such a great artist, the singer. His lyrics are so thoughtful. And what's happening? He's making this record, and how are we going to get this record out for people to hear? And it was a pandemic. He's not playing live. There was all this different talk, and I had introduced him to a bunch of different managers, and everybody was in such an odd state. I couldn't figure out how to help this guy. That's what I really wanted to do. So that's where the label came into play. I went, this is perfect. I've got a vehicle to help this artist, and we can actually do whatever we need to do. So he's the kind of artist that deserves double album, 2 vinyl discs at 45. He deserves to have his lyrics. We've created lyric books to sell with his things. You know, that's the kind of thing I want to do. It's like, depending on who we're working with, what do they need? And they probably wouldn't get that at a major label because there's a lot of worry about the cost of things. Things can be pretty inexpensive. It's mostly man hours. And that's, Jeff and I were able to put a lot of time into these things, and we don't have the pressure of, you know, having a weekly meeting about the finances about things, because it's our own time.
Yeah.
So it's a vehicle for us to sort of help artists that we really like and we want to turn other people on to. And the Lions and Ghosts thing was a pet project, and I always felt like it's a great record and it never really happened. And you know, in these days where Kate Bush can be a huge success, why not go back through and reintroduce this record to the world? So those are our first few projects, and we got a bunch of different stuff coming out next year. So I'm looking forward to just, you know, letting the label grow and become what it's going to become.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you know, because that begs the other question is, you know, lessons learned from Lions and Ghosts, and, you know, this, you know, the biggest band that, you know, wasn't necessarily, you know, it's like, you listen to it now and you're like, how the hell did this, you know, not blow up, you know, that kind of thing. And I know, you know, there's things that are out of your control, and I've heard, you know, horrendous stories about record labels throughout the years. So, you know, how much of what you learned through that experience now informs what you're doing with your own label?
Well, the business has changed so much from those days to these days.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many success stories, you know, working with Aimee Mann for years. I saw her go from a major label to an independent label, and she did it so successfully, so smoothly. She had a really loyal fan base that helped her transition. And also, it sure doesn't hurt to have songs in movies that everybody's watching, or TV shows that everybody's watching. She worked really hard to have the kind of career that she has. She really tailored it to her. And her label just was so well done. That was a great lesson learned about how to do things. And she, you know, she runs that label, and the label is really sort of her baby, and it looks a certain way. It sounds a certain way. And that's really inspiring. I'm also inspired by labels. Remember labels like 4AD and these labels that Sub Pop, that they just were their own little entity, and that's inspiring. And lessons learned from the the bigger companies are that, you know, they pick and choose who they're going to bless, so to
Yes.
speak. So when you're talking about things out of your control, those are the things we're talking about, right? There's, you know, a band like Lions and Ghosts who had a really nice big following in Southern California. We put our record out and hey, we sold 100,000 records. That's amazing. It was all in California. It wasn't anywhere else.
Yeah.
So, you know, part of that is why didn't we have an agent that did this? Why didn't we do this? You know, so we started blaming it all on ourselves and we ended up sonically changing things and becoming unhappy. And that's it. It was, I think it was the record that could have. It just didn't because of those things that are out of our control. We should have stuck to our guns and gone down that path. So I'd like to have a label that would allow an artist to stick to their guns and make
Yeah.
3-4 records to get where they need to go.
Yeah. And I mean, yours is certainly not the only story, you know, along those lines, especially as someone who grew up in the Los Angeles area. Like, you know, for instance, I was a fan of Oingo Boingo, who I thought was going to be, you know, just tremendous. And they were in the LA area. And then I talked to a friend who he went to college in Boston, and he said, yeah, I got to see them in this tiny club. I'm like, why are they playing a tiny club? They sell out the Universal Amphitheater. And he's like, no one really knows them. I'm like, how can they not, you know? And you just, you know, but you know, you're young, you're a kid, you think, well, it's great, it'll spread, but you don't know about the machinations that happen behind the scenes.
Right. And that's a good band to bring up in that sort of scenario, because they should have been massive. The opportunity was there for them, super talented guys, clearly. And they were in tons of soundtracks of that era.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, outside of LA, it's like, oh, I think I heard about them. Aren't they that quirky band that had that song in Weird Science? You know,
Yeah.
they just really didn't. Is that the label? Was it the timing? Did they get lost in the shuffle? Because there was a lot of that in LA in that period, right?
Yeah.
We had the scene was massive, but it was a scene of hair metal. The Sunset Strip thing was happening.
Yeah.
There was sort of the post-punk band thing. That's kind of where we came from, because we ended up playing a lot of shows with Gene Loves Jezebel and Love and Rockets and all these imports from overseas. So we did sort of get put in that bucket, but then we'd play with Guns N' Roses at the Roxy and other things. So nobody knew what to do with us, especially us. And there was many bands like us of that time period.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you brought up Oingo Boingo, because I do remember thinking they were massive, and they really weren't. I think that there's a different perception today, because now we listen to a lot of streaming and we listen to, you know, Sirius or XM radio. And the people that put together those playlists, they're sort of creating what history is. You know, if you listen to First Wave or any of these different, I listen to a lot of Sirius stuff. They have, you know, they play tons of REM, they play tons of Oingo Boingo, they play all this stuff that wasn't necessarily as big as it sounds like it was now.
Yeah.
So they're sort of rewriting history by what they're playing now. Classic rock radio is like that too. I mean, Guns N' Roses are now classic rock radio.
Right.
They're played with the Stones and, you know, all this other stuff. And I'm like, no, they're new. They're a new band.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting, the times that we live in.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so as part of my research, I, of course, went to your website, and on the homepage of your website, it lists the description, the titles: producer, guitarist, lo-fi-hi-fi-ist. And I was just wondering, what is that third line a reference to?
Well, there was a period of my guitar playing where the more lo-fi it was, I thought the better it suited everything I was working on. And then I've sort of come full circle. I used to be the guy that would walk in with a trunk of pedals only to make a pristine guitar sound like a bad $10 keyboard. And I thrived on that for a very long time. And then as I got older and I started morphing my style and working with different people, I now feel like I'm a hi-fi enthusiast, but I find room in my palette for things that don't sound great, but work really well in a song. So I suppose it's a bit of all that. And forever, my friends tease me because I could really come up with some really bad sounds, but on purpose.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, you talk about the streaming and getting rid of the highs, getting rid of the lows, and squashing everything. I think that's also, and at least with mainstream, there's this emphasis on perfection that and there's a lot of stuff in my vast CDs and vinyl collection where it's like, it's technically wrong, but sonically it just sounds so right for the
Right.
song.
And it resonates with you, right? That's where I sort of come from in that lo-fi thing. I felt like, okay, lyrically, the record that I did with the Aimee Mann, Lost in Space,
Mm-hmm.
that record is handfuls and handfuls of very lo-fi sounding stuff, but works so well with the lyric and Amy's voice for that sort of journey, that because to me that record is a journey, and it, all the human emotions that are in it. I wanted sounds that would reflect that, and I felt like we did a great job of matching the sonics to the lyrics in that.
Mm.
And that was a big lo-fi adventure for sure. But the production's hi-fi, the mixing's hi-fi, the mastering's hi-fi. So it blends all those things. And there's a book that I read from this English author, Jez Roden, I think. He wrote about all of Amy's records and the production, the lyrics, and I read it. And that record for him really resonated. And part of it was because of the sonics, and that made me very happy and very proud.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because and I think it's great on the one hand that you can do things with Pro Tools and take a snippet here and then move it, and you can get some very creative stuff. But I think at also the end of the extreme, I also think about like the legendary story of the Kinks when they were making "You Really Got Me," and Dave Davies gets the guitar sound by taking a razor blade and slashing his amplifier because he didn't like the sound, and then got something really raw, and is like, oh, that's it.
Wouldn't be the same song without it, would it?
No, not at all.
Yeah, that it's amazing, that journey.
Yeah. Well, that takes care of all my questions. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to discuss?
Well, it was nice that we talked about Sparkle Plenty Records. Thank you very much for the
Sure.
plug on that. And I got to talk about Bird Streets a bit, which is always on my mind because I love them. Do you know his records?
I only know in preparing for this interview and
Okay.
starting to look, and okay, and this is interesting, and how you got Aimee to play bass on some of the songs, and so I've read about it, but I haven't listened yet.
So if you get a chance, because it sounds like you are a big music fan, he did a record with Jason Faulkner about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's a fun record. So you might want to check that out. And then we did release a song called Unkind that has Aimee playing bass and has some of her crew on that. We put that out a couple months ago. So I'd love for you to check that out just personally.